Welcome to the Burnt Pancakes podcast. I'm your host, Katie, and today we're having a conversation about traumatic births. I have my very good friend, Vanessa, on, and she's going to open up about her experience with her traumatic birth and her way of healing from it, which she described as unconventional. So I'm very excited about this. So welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So fun having you. So a little backstory on how we know each other. Vanessa and I went to high school together, class of 99. We went off to separate colleges, so we kind of lost touch in our 20s. You were off abroad, meeting your husband. We became moms in our 30s, and that's kind of where we've reconnected. I found your like openness and honesty about motherhood was so refreshing to me because I was drowning, and to see another mom who was like
drowning also.
We were like, let's help each other. But it was just so refreshing to see like, it's not all perfect. Like my children aren't. And I looked in your eyes one day and I was like, I feel the way you're feeling and I could relate. So when you mentioned a traumatic birth, I actually don't know the story yet. I thought, wow, I want to hear this. And I guarantee there's so many viewers out there that are going to relate to this. So I appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
I'm so grateful. I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited to be on one of these. Like,
who would have known Katie back in high school would be?
I know. It's so exciting, and I'm so grateful to be here. Like,
Yay.
I'm so honored.
Let's get this voice out. You know, mothers need to hear all this.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I did look up. I looked up the official definition of traumatic birth, and this is what Google refers to it as.
Okay.
Birth trauma is distress experienced by a mother during or after childbirth. While trauma can be physical, it is often emotional and psychological. And birth trauma is not always about what happens during labor and the birth. It can also refer to how you as the mother are left feeling afterwards. Studies show 10 to 33% of women experience this. Would you say that is an accurate definition?
I think so. I was thinking about it for myself because you had mentioned that, and I was, obviously we're talking about traumatic birth, and I thought, okay, well, what does that mean to me?
Yeah.
And what? In my case, it was very much a physically traumatic labor and birth.
Okay.
That led to like postpartum, just feeling like I didn't even know I was traumatized until like years later, or rather, I didn't connect to the feeling of, oh my gosh, scratch that. I connected to the feeling that something wasn't, that I just felt like off, really off, but I didn't connect to the knowingness that like, oh, that's trauma.
Yeah.
I didn't label it as anything. It just because
like
I think
fog, and I think gray cloud.
And I think that's like, so in my experience, that's so much of motherhood is like, we say like, we don't know what we're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing. We don't get the guidebook.
Traumatic.
And right. And just that like, there's so much unknown that it is like, just keep swimming, keep swimming. And it's like, you're just doing your best every day, not knowing what the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, well, I didn't know what I didn't know. Like, I didn't know it was called that. I didn't know there was
something I could do about it. I could have made it easier on myself.
Yeah.
So let me backtrack a little bit. You have 2 boys. So this is also where we connect. We were both raised with sisters and we have only boys.
Yep.
So I think that has just like shook our world.
And it's funny,
like, I can't relate to these kids.
Well, it's funny because I was never the kind of mom that was like, I really wanted a girl, or I really wanted I was just like, okay, I'm going to get what I get. Yeah. And I have 2 boys. So Axel is 7 and Iggy is 5.
Okay.
So
7 and 5.
They're still young. And like I was mentioning to you, like I feel like just in this last year really is the first time for me that I'm like, I feel like I have both nostrils above water. Yes. I'm actually like, I am above water actually. I'm just starting to like, okay, I can do this, versus it's been hard. The last 7 years have been just hard. Like motherhood.
And it's okay to say, I absolutely love being a mom. I love being a mom. Has it been extremely hard? The hardest thing I've ever done? Absolutely. So it can be so rewarding and wonderful and hard at the same time.
Yeah.
But this part isn't really talked about as much. But I feel the same way. Like this year with my 3rd turning 3, I have finally come up for air. and started to say, okay, I can be me again. Like I can find I'm not just like Katie, the mom taking care of these kids. I'm like, oh, I'm a person too, you know?
Yeah.
So let's go to your birth story. Was it with your first?
So it was with my second. So my first was pretty like, he was a C-section, but he was a planned C-section.
Okay.
So
mine too. My first was a C-section. So it was not in my plan to have a C-section. That's where it was like, whoa, this did not go according to plan.
Same. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be natural. I'm going to, you know, I'm going to just the whole deal. Had a doula both times and was, you know, felt really excited about having that support, and that felt really good to me. But with my first, he was breech.
Mine too.
We couldn't turn him. Tried, didn't work.
I tried everything to turn him.
And then it was just like, okay, this isn't happening. And I was like, and I was okay with that. It was planned enough ahead of time that it wasn't like right in the moment. And so I was like, okay, this is okay.
Mine was, I was able to schedule a C-section and go in and like prepare myself for like what actually is going to happen during the C-section. Yeah. But I still like, for me, that was really hard to have that C-section and just be like, this isn't the way I wanted it to go. I'm prepared for it and I know it's coming, but I had 8 weeks to like, he's not turning, prepare yourself.
Right. And it's interesting because so my second ended up being an emergency C-section, and I'll tell you about it in a second. But it's funny because it wasn't until after his birth that was much more like scary. Yeah. That I realized after that was part of the sadness in my postpartum was I thought back to both of them, like I felt robbed of that experience of having, I mean, I know moms who have natural labor are probably like, girl, you didn't miss much, or like, it's like
other damages from that. But no, I understand that because I had a C-section for my first, and then I did do the VBAC for the other two. And that for me was healing to go like, I mean, there was other scars from those two that, you know, we don't have to mention, but it was almost like, okay, I was able to do that. Whereas with the first, I left feeling like I didn't get to birth him, even though C-section is a birth and like of course it totally is, but it's a different feeling of like, I didn't get that chance. Yeah. And just, there was a weird feeling of like missing outness, which is strange. Because with my first, I never even felt a contraction. Yeah, so I was like, I don't know what it feels like to have your water break or to go into labor. I was like, I just showed up and they're like, your 8 o'clock appointment, welcome. And I was like, okay. Same. It's funny. Actually, I remember that with my first like the day of, it was so surreal because I did my hair, I did my makeup. Scheduled. We were like driving there, like, this is so weird. We're gonna go. And it was so very strange. But so with my second, what happened? So we planned for the VBAC. We tried to do the VBAC and had my doula. I had one of my best friends came and did Reiki with me while I was laboring. So the day of, I'm laboring. I'm at home. My oldest at the time was 2. He stayed with us for a certain amount of time. At a certain time, my mom came and took him, and everything going according to plan. Everything was going according to plan. My girlfriend, like I said, she was doing Reiki on me. I was in the bathtub, and then my doula was with me as well. And we had kind of a very loose plan that it wasn't like I hadn't decided, yes, I'm giving birth at home or I'm going to the hospital. Like it was like, I was just all about like, I'm going to see what I feel, what my body feels like doing, what's happening. And so at a certain point, I just felt like I want to go to the hospital. And it's like you had that knowing.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And now thinking back, I'm like, thank God I really listened to my gut because it was a traumatic birth. So end up getting to the hospital, laboring somewhat what I'm thinking is normal. And then get to the part where it's like, okay, they get me in a room and I'm, starting to push. And there were just complications really.
Did you have an epidural at this time or no epidural?
No yes, and these are the things too. I'm like, I don't remember. What did I do?
Too, I will remember this birth for my entire life. The other day, someone asked what time was he born at? And I'm like, okay, I used to know this by heart, and I had to go look in his baby book. Yeah. Like, what time was he born at again? I'm like, oh my God, I need to write this stuff down because I don't remember anymore.
No, I know. It's wild. So no, I had this at this point, I hadn't had an epidural yet. And essentially what ended up happening was um I started to lose a lot of blood. Like I
Oh.
started bleeding a lot, and it was it was so surreal because you're laying there and then
Oh.
you have all this
You're
team of
most
this
vulnerable,
team
like, "Okay, everyone, come on in."
and this like team there was, it was like my doula, my husband, and there were at least, four other nurses and a doctor in there. And I remember, God, thank God for my doula. That's one thing that I would say, like having
Having that
physical
support.
support there. My husband was amazing, but it was his first time too.
Yeah,
Like he
yeah.
hadn't had
I
experienced
would
that
say it
kind
was
of
quite
labor.
traumatic for my husband every time. He went through some birth trauma.
For real.
But they're not ready for this. And there's something about, like, I felt like as a woman, I just kind of got in the zone. And so it was kind of like, I'm in the zone. Like, I don't know what's happening because I've never done this before. But for him,
Mhm.
he was kind of just like, okay, deer in headlights.
And it is sad.
Which
Like
is
I talked
fine.
to my husband afterwards and he was like, "Oh my God, it was so scary. It was so scary."
Oh,
Especially so eventually what ended up happening was yeah, like it just the baby was in distress, not it wasn't critical, but like
okay.
they weren't able to get like signals on him. They were like sticking
Mm.
probes in me to him, all the
Oh,
things,
gosh.
trying to get readings. And they were just like, something's not right. It's just not
Not
proceeding the
moving.
way it should. And then as a result, I started bleeding a lot. And then it was one of those things where it just turned so quickly.
Wow.
And at this point, no, I had not yet had an epidural. So I was feeling everything, but he wasn't like, it wasn't like I was fully crazy dilated and he was ready to come out, but it was enough to where they were like, okay, this is not moving in the right direction. And so very quickly, they were like, you're losing a lot of blood. We need to take you to have an emergency C-section. And it was just this really surreal, it felt like an out of a movie because it was
Mhm.
this really surreal experience of feeling like everything just happened so fast. And that was another thing. I just felt like I had no say in it. And even
It's like
though,
we're telling you what's going to
yes,
happen and
and
you're
that,
just helpless.
yes, and that was another thing that after the fact, I was like, how much agency did I have in
Yeah.
that? Like,
Could you have said, "No, I want to keep trying," or
right.
"Tell me more," or
I,
talk
and then
to
but then you have this whole team of medical practitioners there
that
telling
all
you
went to
like,
med
no,
school telling you.
right. And then
Mm.
and my doula was such a love, and I remember, God, she was holding my hand the whole time, and I just
Mm.
felt just so much tenderness and amazing support from her. And she was like, and she had a little bit of concern too and
Mhm.
misgiving about where it
Why
was
it's not
all,
moving.
yeah, where it was all headed and what was going on. And she was very experienced. So um I left like let go of her hand, looked at my husband, and that was another thing. I was again like, why can't he come with me? Like, where are you taking me? What are you doing? And I just thought like
Did he have to stay in the room? He
he
couldn't go to the
he
C-section?
couldn't come with me. And so I was just wheeled away, taken in this room. And then it really was like ER. It was like
Yeah.
all
That
then
room is freezing cold,
it was
lights,
that I remember.
so bright,
That I remember
sterile. Yeah.
being like so cold
Mhm.
and the smell of blood. And it was just everyone was moving really, really fast. They did give me an epidural then. And then oh,
It would happen in minutes?
and then I went straight into the C-section. So then we went right into that,
Mhm.
and it's really amazing. It truly is
I mean,
amazing how,
so grateful that we have that
of
option.
course,
Yeah, I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, if we lived on the prairie and my son was breached, he would have lost me to childbirth. Like, thank God for the C-section, but darn it, why didn't he flip? You know?
no,
Yeah.
totally. Well, so and then in this case, it's like they had the C-section, he came out. And then it was the whole, they were checking on him. Well, like,
Yeah.
what was the trauma? What had happened? And
Yeah.
he ended up being fine. There wasn't,
They had no answer for you. Like, oh, well,
he just, his vitals had been really funky. Things were, and it was just more so it was affecting me. And so they were like, we need to get him out. So they got him out, and then they were checking him. And then it's so weird. The whole experience is so weird because I feel like from that moment when I remember laying there and just feeling like something's not right. Like, I don't know how I haven't done this. I haven't
you,
done this
or
with
just
the
something felt
with the labor, just
okay.
with the process. I was laying there and having this be my first, vaginal birth,
Right.
and thinking, I've never done this, but this isn't going the right way.
Yeah.
This is, I don't know how it's
How it's
supposed
supposed
to
to go.
happen,
Yeah.
but this feels, it felt scary, but not in like oh my God, this is big and I'm having a baby. It felt like something's wrong,
Okay.
like beforehand. And so then after he's out and they're, stitching me up, and then at that point it's like, okay,
Yeah,
yay,
you have a
yay, you have a
baby.
baby. But then it was the weird disconnect of like, for example, I remember with my first, in the first C-section, they brought the baby to me right away. I saw him, we did a little like cheek snuggle.
Oh.
My husband saw him, we had like
Oh, and
our
at this
favorite,
point,
we
he's
had
still
our
not
favorite
there.
we had our favorite song playing on the room. This was
Oh.
not that. This was, they got the baby, they took him, I didn't see him.
Oh my
They took
gosh.
him, did all his vitals, did all the stuff, took him out of the room, and then started working on me. And so I didn't know
Is he
where,
okay? Where
I
is
didn't know
he?
if he was okay. I didn't know where he went. I didn't know.
Was there anyone at the time like communicating to you, like, "Hey, mom, we're doing this. This is baby's."
I'm
It's
sure,
hard to
sure that
remember.
they
It's
were.
hard to
I'm sure
remember.
that they were.
I do feel like
but
with my C-section, I was very out of it. Like, I sort of remember like going back in the recovery room, and then they were like, "Oh, do you want to do skin to skin?" And I was like, "What? Yeah, okay." Like with my other
yeah,
ones, they were on me the minute they came out. This
yeah.
was like a half an hour later, or I don't even know how long it was. It
Well,
was,
and
yeah.
that's another part of it, was that like I remember with the first, I remember him, like when I did finally get to be in the same room with him,
Mm-hmm.
he was on me. I have pictures of it. I
Mm.
remember the feeling of holding him for the first time, and my whole family was there. It was like the
Yeah.
sweetest. And this was not that. It
Yeah.
was a life-saving procedure. So it was just very different. And that was something else that I more, again, not even in the first month after, but like maybe like a year or so after, thinking like,
I didn't get that.
recognizing, I don't remember when the first time I held him was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. Like, I really didn't.
Yeah.
I think at that point, when the labor started going south and I had that gut feeling, that's why I feel like when the trauma, like the
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote trauma,
Yeah.
kicked in. And after that, so that was 5 years ago.
Right.
And
We're
like
still
I said,
doing it.
still,
But I still
figuring
look
it
back
out.
at the C-section, I think, was motherhood so hard for me because I didn't get that bond initially, or like, did that affect our relationship? Because they always talk about how important that golden hour is. That what they call it? Golden hour? That first hour after birth. I'm like, he was wrapped in a swaddle the first time I held him, and it was after we had like left the room that I actually got to hold him. So it's like, how did that affect? I'm sure he's fine. But the mom in me is like,
No,
what did that do to our relationship?
It's so true. And
no wonder we butt heads so much.
It's so true. And you hear so much research too about just different aspects of birthing and how that affects just child development, and like whether they come out of the birth canal or if they don't, and all these different things. I always wonder,
because he's a firstborn, but he is so not a firstborn to me. He just doesn't, when people describe their firstborn, I'm like, that is not my son. And it's like, it's because he came when he was not ready. He was 39 weeks before he was ready to come out, like in a totally different, he was like, what's happening? So I always wonder about that.
Yeah. So the other thing that happened, the other thing that it added to that was, so this little guy is Iggy. So my first son is Axel. Iggy is the one that had the traumatic birth. And then, so, everything, they sewed me up. He was okay, checked vitals, all was good. Mom and baby together. Okay. Then, whatever it ended up being, like 2 days later, little brother came to visit, brought him his first little stuffy that he still has to this day and sleeps with every night. It's this, and he knows it's so cute. He knows his brother gave it to him. It's the sweetest.
That's so cute.
Anyway, had all that, wrapped all that up, went home. Right. And it's so funny too, the things I do remember. I remember my mom had been staying at our house with Axel, watching him, and just taking care of shop, while I was gone for whatever that was, 2-3 days. I remember the very first thing I did, walking in with a new baby in my arms, walking in the house. And I mean, the house was not like it was a disaster, but now I look back, I'm like, oh girl, you were in trauma mode. I started picking everything up
Oh
the minute I walked in.
Right after giving birth.
Right after giving, I walked in and I was like, okay, let's put this way here. Okay, let's fix the pillows. I think I was just so like disconnected from holy shit, what just happened to me? Like this was so much. And I think it was still just
huge stressor on your body. And that affects.
And I think it was this whole thing of like, again, it felt like such a loss of control, such a like, I had no control, right? It was like, I wasn't in charge of any of it. It was all just done to me, for me. And
so you're picking up the house because I can control
I'm like,
that.
I can put that pillow in the right spot. I can whatever it was. But it's funny because I remember in the moment thinking, it's weird. The things that you remember. He's in my arms. Everyone's like, oh, you're home. I'm walking in, picking everything up. And in the back of my mind thinking, you are such a control freak. Why are you picking everything up? Just sit down and enjoy your baby. Like you just walk. Like I remember thinking, that's weird. Why are you doing that? And thinking like, oh my God, I must look like such a clean freak to my family, which I kind of am in a weird way. But like it was, I remember thinking, this is weird. Why are you doing that right now? That's not, anyway. So that was really interesting. So then my mom, she's amazing. She is a traditional Mexican mama. She stays when my sisters had their babies and when I had my babies, she stayed with us for a full month.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. And oh God, I'm going to cry about it. Just thinking about it now.
She brought my tissues. Oh, that's
she,
awesome.
She stayed with me for a month and like, I love my mom so much. And I don't know what I would have done because, it was just so much help. I mean, any mom any new mom, whether it's your first or after, that I think if you have a good relationship with your mom, and you can lean on that, and she is there. Oh, it's such a gift. It's such a gift, and it
makes you look at people who don't have family around and think, how do they?
Yeah, or just have difficult relationships, and that's just hard. So I definitely had so much support. So I remember, gosh, it must have been. It was within the first week. I want to say it was like 3 days. Three days home. 3 days home. I'm sitting on the couch, and all of a sudden I have like kind of like mild chills in my body. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't know. I just had a baby. This is, I guess, it's like all the things your body's going through. It's like, okay, I guess this might be normal too.
Everything hurts and I'm supposed to keep going and feed this baby. And
we went for a little walk around the block, down to the stop sign and back kind of a deal.
It's about as far as you can go with a C-section.
And so we did that. And I remember coming back and just being like, something doesn't feel right. Like something's not right. And so got home. I remember my sister's there. She's like painting my toenails. I'm like, I just don't feel well. And she's like, call the nurse and, call the nurse clinic, check in. So long story short, ended up getting checked back into the hospital. And I had the whole like, oh, anytime you have a surgery, there's a chance of infection. That was exactly what happened. So I had some kind of like an infection that arose from, just being in the hospital and everything that was done. And I ended up having to be hospitalized for like another, I don't even know how long I was there. It was like 3 or 4 days.
With baby not there.
So then that was the thing. So when I went with him because I was breastfeeding.
They're on you every hour.
And I'm like, Anna was like, I can't leave. Like, I'm not going to leave right? But so I get there and within the first 3 hours, they tell me like, well, you can't stay with the baby. Like you're not allowed to. And
how traumatic is that?
And then I was
that alone would cause me like, because when I had the C-section, my blood pressure got really, really high after. And I remember they came in and checked every hour. And that, of course, made my blood pressure go up. And at one point they said, if we can't get it down, we're going to have to move you to this floor and baby's going to stay up here. And I was like, that cannot happen. Like mama bear, I was like, no.
Well, and that was the mode. That was exactly the mode I went into because then I was like, no. I was like, who do we need to talk to that I'm keeping my baby? Like if I need to be treated, I'm not like, what do we do? Cause I'm not. And my husband was like, no, they can't like you can't.
He's like, I can't be home with this thing.
Like what? And so he ended up staying with me, but then but it was like, that was the whole thing. And they were like, well, we don't normally do this.
Cause it's a baby on a different floor. That's not the.
Yes. They had to, it was just exactly the whole, like mothers had to be on one unit and babies in the other. And so they gave me like permission to keep him with me. And it was sweet. I remember I did have a few friends that just kept coming and doing rounds with me so that someone would hold him and be there so that I could just
rest.
Rest. And at that point, it wasn't even resting. It was truly still like healing. So another thing I should mention was that, so I lost a ton of blood. So I had a blood transfusion.
Okay.
So that was something that happened
happened the first time you're in the hospital, or at the second time you went?
During the birth, when I had the emergency C-section, I had lost so much blood that they gave me a blood transfusion. So that was one thing, not necessarily related to the infection that I got. Although, and then this is another thing.
You were probably just so weak too. Yeah.
Totally. And then, so then when I was in the hospital, then I was just like on tons of antibiotics. So it was like heavy rounds of antibiotics. And then, had my friends and my family coming, helping, sitting with me. But again, like it wasn't resting. It was like treatment. I was getting treated. Then I went home. So then I felt like it was this like full on roller coaster, because it wasn't then until I finally got discharged from that. And then I was stable. It was okay. They sent me on my way. Baby was fine. And then that was kind of the good thing. They were still checking in on him the whole time too. Yeah. Obviously he was okay. So they sent us back home. And then it was like, okay, now I can start this whole healing, living, this newborn, parenting two small kids under 2, the whole thing. Yeah. So again, I feel like the trauma started, like I could tell in the middle of labor, like something is not right. And it just continued to kind of unravel. And so, and God, and it's so, I want to say too, like, thank you so much, because honestly, I'm so grateful for this conversation, because I talked to people about like, oh yeah, and related certain parts of the story.
Like your birth story, you share with people.
But I've never talked about it. Like, it makes such a difference right now, listening to myself talk it. It's like, honestly, right? This is how you heal. Like right now, having this conversation, this is a whole nother layer of the healing. And I think in my experience, I think that's how healing happens. It's not like a wham bam.
Yeah. It's not like you're physically okay now, your infection's gone, you're good to go.
Right. There's so many layers to it, because it's the physical, it's the mental, it's the emotional, it's the spiritual, there's all the different layers of accessing it. So, and then it's funny, like now, and again, hearing myself say it, looking back, it's like, gosh, like I didn't know the questions to ask. I didn't for sure. You were asking me,
did you ask your doctor, or did your doctor ask you? Because they always do it that 6-week appointment, like, how are you feeling? Like you do that little, that box, and it's always like, I'm fine.
Well, and I think too, for me, yes, at that appointment,
I didn't know how to say like, this is hard, and I'm not quite myself right now.
And I think there's a certain element of feeling like, I don't know, for me, like I'm overwhelmed, but I don't even know that I'm overwhelmed.
Right.
It's
like, can't recognize it.
Well, and because it's so, everything about it is so about motherhood, about the situation is so new, that it's like, that whole idea of like, this is my new normal. It's like, oh, well, is this what the new normal is supposed to feel like? Like, well, maybe I feel so off because I'm just not used to it yet.
Right.
This is the new normal, and I haven't.
This is what motherhood is.
And I guess this is what it is now. I'm just supposed to be traumatized
for the next 18 years. Well, I do remember I went for a follow-up appointment with my doctor, and at the time I was about to go back to work. So I think it was like with the C-section, they made me go back after like 3 or 4 months. I was about to go back to work. My dad had just passed away. So I was an absolute wreck. And the doctor goes, okay, how are you doing? Like, how are you mentally feeling? And I just went, I'm fine. And like, I didn't even tell her, I'm grieving my dad right now. I'm about to go back to work, and I don't know how that can even happen. And I just said, I'm fine. So how are like 10% of women have traumatic births? No, so many do. We just don't know that it's described as traumatic. We don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to ask for help. I had plenty of help. I just didn't know to ask and say, this is really hard and I'm breaking down right now.
And even to know, like, it's that whole idea, I don't know what I need.
Yeah.
It's like,
I don't know what I need. I need help, but I don't know what.
Like, I don't, like, what kind of, I don't know. And it's funny because, like, since, and now being a little bit more seasoned, people say, like, one of the worst things you can ask is like, well, what do you need? It's like, don't ask that. Just bring the groceries. Just,
that's so true.
Just drop over a cup of tea. Just come and tidy up their house or throw in a load of laundry. Just do the things, because
that you wish you could have had.
Because that's like a whole nother level of mental load that you're like, now I have to give you something to do.
Yes.
It's easier just to say no. Like, oh no, I don't need it. Cause then you have to, that's another task. It's like, okay, I don't know. But if people kind of come in and just do for you, sometimes that's the best that can happen because, and again, I think I had so much of that with my mom, with both kids, because that was exactly what she did. She just did. She made all the meals. She took care of the older one. She took care of me. She took care of all of us. And then I think like, oh my God, moms, like it never ends.
It doesn't. I'll do that one day for my child.
I hope I get to do that, with my grandkids and my daughters-in-law. But yeah, it's such a crazy, crazy wild ride. And so yeah, for me, I think like, okay, so this was another part of my journey. When I was in college and dating, my husband and I dated long distance, transatlantic for like 6 years. And during all those different periods of life, I had a history of depression in that time. So I knew like what I felt like,
when things felt off, and
I knew what depression felt like for me. And I was really nervous. That was one of my biggest things with my first pregnancy. I was really anxious about the idea of having postpartum depression because I was like, well, I know I'm already prone to that. What
and
the
this
heck
could trigger it, or
this could trigger
a very common time for women to feel that.
Yeah. So I talked to my doctor, and with my first, I was on antidepressants during my pregnancy because I was just feeling life stuff in general, and it was okay, and it was it was okay for baby, so we did that, and then I did it for oh gosh, I don't know, maybe like 5 to 6 months after, and I was able, and that worked for me, and I was able to ride that wave with that support, and it was golden.
Great.
And with my first, again, I didn't have as much, it was the new momness. It was also like having one kid and being able, and I was a stay-at-home mom at that time, and being able to pour all of my life into that. There was something about the kind of like, not that it was easy, but it was like I was able to it was manageable. I was much more able to take things as they came. With the second, the whole like, going from from 1 to 2 was really hard for me. None to 1 was like, okay.
For me, 0 to 1 was like, it rocked my world.
Yeah. See, and I think that's the other thing. So
when I had my second, having known what I went through with the first, I was kind of a little bit more prepared. So for me, 0 to 1 was like, shook me.
And I think that's,
but also I feel like that birth was harder for me. The first one, second birth was a little bit easier. And I think that's kind of why that transition was easier, because I just didn't, the hormones lined up better on the second one. I think
that's the thing about motherhood, is like there's so much nuance to it all, because we all have our own individual stories. Every baby's different. Every mom is different. Every stage of life. It's like every person is so unique in what they're going through in every moment with every kid. So,
do you think you got postpartum with the second?
So I know I did. So that's what I was going to say. The first one, I did that preemptively because I just knew I want that support.
It's really good intuition, I feel like.
Yeah.
You have good
because I know how much I had struggled in those depressive times, and I was like, I can't imagine what that would be like with a baby. And I just kind of wanted to get ahead of the game. So with the second, same thing. I talked to my doctor, went back on, was on them throughout the pregnancy, and thank God. So I was still on them, and I was still on them probably for like at least a good year afterwards. And thank goodness, because it, like I said, it was much harder for me. And then especially in light of that particular birth experience, it was so traumatic that I thank God I had that crutch as well, because who knows what the heck I would have been without that, but so now another thing that was really interesting was, so I'm a total like hippie spiritual mama. And, so I had before, gosh, it must've been it was before I was pregnant with my first, I had done an ayahuasca ceremony, with a shaman, which is
okay. Tell us what that is, because I don't know what that is.
So ayahuasca is a plant medicine. So it's like a natural plant that occurs, and you have but it's kind of like not necessarily hallucinogenic, but it like takes you on a journey, kind of a deal. And they're really typical in South America. Nowadays they're very these ceremonies are really kind of like trendy now, and like people do them a lot. But it's the kind of thing where like essentially when done appropriately and like with really great guidance, you have a ceremony where you pray over the plant and the person. You allow for like the whatever healing and understanding that needs to come through for the person, and then you ingest the plant through like a tea elixir kind of they give you, and then it's bitter, gross tasting, and then after a while you just start to feel the effects, and you feel.
So you did this before?
I did this. So I've done it a few times. I did the first time was before I was pregnant with my first.
Okay.
And it was real. Whenever I do any kind of work like that, I always just I'm like, it's all about intention. Like I was like, I don't want to trip my balls off. I don't want to go to the dark side. I don't want to see scary shit that I don't, I was like, I want this to be really lovely. I want to be open to whatever healing needs to come through to me. So I was really intentional about that the first time I did it. So after I had Iggy and I had this traumatic birth experience, there was just this feeling in me like I wanted and needed to have another ceremony experience.
Got it.
So, and this was like a friend, this shaman that I worked with is like a friend of a friend.
Okay.
And she was like a typical little shaman looking lady, and because I had experienced her before, I felt so safe. It was in a private residence in a backyard in the desert with like all these beautiful like trees and birds. And so essentially, we prayed over the medicine in me. And then she was like, just do whatever you need to do. Do you need to sit down? Do you need to lay down? And then you especially, once you start to kind of feel the effects, you kind of like, you just have whatever experience you need. If you need to just lay there and be quiet and feel it, if you need, people start crying. Sometimes
Did you go in with the intention, like, I want to heal from that birth? Or is it just, I just don't feel myself. I want to get myself back.
I went in with the intention that I wanted to heal something within me that was asking to be recognized.
Okay.
And so
maybe at the time you didn't necessarily know like that birth has affected me.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it wasn't so much that I was like, oh, I'm going for that. It was just something in me was like, you need to do this again. Like this feels like the right, you've done it before. I had a great positive experience my first session. And I thought like, I want to do this again. So this was so trippy. So in this experience, I'm laying on a blanket underneath this beautiful tree. And I just was like, okay, I'm just going to lay here. This just feels right. So I lay down and close my eyes and I start seeing like this, just like menagerie of like colors. And I remember felt like I was in a jungle. I heard all these birds that were not there. I heard all these birds. I saw all these colors, saw the birds. And at one point, and I remember feeling like I was like laying down on the ground, and it was like literally like the roots of the earth were going into reach, like connecting to like the roots and the nerves in my body. And I literally just felt like I was melting into the earth and I was part of it. And then at one point, and I know this sounds so wild and out there, but like this was for real my experience. I could feel like I could feel like the blood in my body was like, I could feel it moving and I could feel it cleansing.
Like circulating everywhere.
I could feel like, but like I could tell it was like cleaning. It was like the tubes in the blood and everything were like cleaning themselves out. And I could definitely feel like a big concentration around like my womb area. And I just felt like a lot of energy there. And when I came out, I asked her, and all this to say, after I had something that always lingered in the back of my mind, which I wasn't overly concerned about, but just kind of weirded me out, was like I had that blood transfusion and I was like, that's so weird that I have like somebody else's blood in me. Like, thank God, thank you to that person, and thank God for these life-saving measures, for sure. But it tripped me out. I was like, that is so weird. Like, there's somebody, like, who is that person? And what? I don't know. It was just a weird thing to me.
Okay.
But not anything that I could really do anything about.
But it's a thought in your mind.
Yeah. It was weird. So I'm having this experience, with the shaman, and I'm laying there and I come out of the experience, and then you talk through like, well, what came up? And she asked me very, just questions about, just the whole point afterwards is then like you're processing. And they say it's essentially like, 100 therapy sessions in one is especially what it is, because you're physically, spiritually processing all of this, but then you have this beautiful container of a person that's like helping you and pulling out,
interpret it, and
yes, and giving you feedback and just literally helping you to process everything that's coming up in the moment. So I'm telling her, I'm saying, it was weird. It felt like my blood was being cleaned. And I just could feel like, my womb was being really like lovingly like tended to. And she's just like listening. I'm explaining, what I was feeling. And she looks at me and she says, and it's interesting. In this process, she ingests some of it as well. So she's having this kind of like symbiotic like experience with you as she's like holding and creating this energetic space for you.
Okay.
And so, she's tripping a little bit with you too. And so, and she looks at me and she says, that's exactly what that was. She's like, I felt for you, she's like, I could feel it in the moment. Like it was very much a womb cleansing. It was a womb healing to heal your womb. And she's like, you're exactly right. Like your blood was completely cleansed right now. Like energetically and spiritually.
Did you feel like so light after this?
It was that, well, and yes. And they tell you when you do these kind of ceremonies, like you're supposed to eat really, really clean for like a week before. You want to eat like as much like plant-based diet as you can, tons of water. And then same thing for like the few days after. So definitely I had been prepping myself, but I also, I definitely in the next few days, I just felt like I felt different. I was like, I don't want to say I felt like myself, because at this point I don't know. She's a work in progress still. Don't know who she is yet. But I felt lighter. I definitely just felt like the freshest, newest version of me. And I mean, some people.
Wait, let me think. How long after the birth was that? So how many years after? Or?
I want to say, I mean, I think he must have been like a year and a half. Like he was still little. Okay. This was like a year and a half after. Okay. No, probably closer to a year. Okay. Yeah, it was wild. And I know that to some people might be like, okay, that's crazy. I fully believe in that. And I believe in my own experience. I believe in that was truly in that moment what I connected to. And it felt so healing. And I remember my mom was watching, I don't know if she was watching Knox that day, but I went to my mom's house right after I did that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had a womb healing, and like my blood was cleansed. And that was like the biggest takeaway I took from it was like, oh my gosh, this was amazing. Like I needed that. Yeah. And again, I went in not specifically because I wanted to heal that birth experience, but like it ended up being that was needed. Exactly what I needed in that moment. And I think anytime you do any kind of plant medicine like that too, it's like, and when I say plant medicine, there's like ayahuasca, there's, psilocybin, which is mushrooms. There's all sorts of different things you can do. But when you have experiences like that, I think, it elicits whatever is meant to come up at that moment, right? There's
or almost like you've been suppressing something, and it just like, yes, it came out that you're like, wow, I'm not okay from that. Exactly. Wow.
So I'm really grateful to that experience, and I'm really grateful. I would not have done that had I not had that experience known about it before. And, again, like I just have friends that, we talk about in that this kind of like spiritual, energetics. So these are the types of things that we're like into and aware of. So it's like, I think had I not been in that world and hadn't had other friends who had experiences and like felt safe to do that, I might not have even, obviously I wouldn't have even probably considered it, but it was really helpful to me.
Do you feel like since that time you have been healed, or is it still like a journey that you're still like?
I feel like, I think healing, I think motherhood, I feel like it is just an ongoing healing process. Yes. I really feel like, I mean, in terms of that birth, I actually, in terms of that specific birth, I think I'm still healing. I think I still am.
Mhm.
Like literally talking to you today and having this conversation. Like I said, it's right now. I'm like, oh my God, I'm
It
so
still
grateful.
brings you back.
It brings me
Yeah.
back. And it's like things that it's like just awarenesses that, gosh, I just didn't know. And again, I think sometimes really truly talking about things, sharing things that are hard,
Mhm.
being vulnerable about them, that is such a deep level of healing because especially for myself, I know like I'm an external processor. Like I understand more about how I'm feeling and by saying it out loud to friends
Yeah.
or or a
Yeah.
therapist or counselor, whoever it is. So I definitely think I'm still healing.
Yeah.
I think I'm definitely still healing. But again, I think there's so many. So there's like the physical, right? Like, of course, like I did
Mhm.
things my doctor recommended, and I had I encapsulated my placenta
Oh,
both
you
times, and
did?
yeah, that was really cool. Actually, really, that was a cool experience too. I encapsulated my placenta with both my boys, and then I just popped them like vitamins,
Mhm.
and then this was actually really fascinating with my first, she made capsules out of them, and then she made a tincture, which is like
Okay.
like a little
Yeah,
liquid.
liquid.
And the cool thing about that she told me is she's like, whenever you get to and the tincture you can use almost just like a supplement for yourself
Wow.
because it's your own, it's like your own
DNA.
jacked up vitamin everything
Yeah.
essentially because
Yeah.
it's your own DNA. And then because it's coupled with your babies, it gives you like all these super, I don't know the science behind the specific science terms, but it's like just this like amazing supplement that's like made from your own body. So with the tincture, she was like, whenever you get to half the bottle, you can, if you fill it with 100 proof alcohol, um, it'll like regenerate itself and it'll kind of like keep
Whoa.
going. So I have this tincture bottle that and like every now and
And you
then,
still have
yeah,
it?
I still have it. You can like
Whoa.
just keep
It grows
using it.
itself.
Yeah, it's wild.
Wow.
Super
Wow.
wild. So anyway, so again, like there's the physical things you can do. Then there's, the mental emotional stuff. So like I always seen some kind of like a counselor,
Mhm.
mentor, coach, therapist. Um, and that definitely helped. Like
Yeah.
I really, really quick in was like, I need
When
support.
something feels off, talk to someone.
Yeah.
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 Because that's something I didn't feel like I opened up enough. Like it got to the point where I started to tell friends like, "Oh, this is really hard," but I know
Yeah.
that first year was like I tried to just do it all,
Yeah.
and it was really, really hard.
Well, and you know what's interesting? And again, everybody is different.
Mhm.
Like I remember I had a friend that would be like, well, you should consider, do you want to join like the MOPS groups? And I was like, no, like that. Not that I was scared of that, but I was like, that just felt like too much. I was like, that's
Yeah.
another thing to do
Yeah.
right now. Like that's too much. And
But I love that you knew what was gonna feel right. Because for some people, it's like that would have made a world of a difference. But for you, it's like,
well,
this feels right to me and I'm okay listening to
Well, and
that.
again, I think that's where everyone is different but even so, then I was like, oh my God, am I supposed to be going to this group? And I'm not. And like, would I be feeling better if I
Yes.
was? And there was just something in me that was like, that's just not my jam. Like, that's just not for me. But what worked for me is, I make connections with people. Like when I make a connection with someone and I know like this person feels safe to me, I go there right away. Like I'm not a small talk person. I cannot just do surface
Let
level
me tell you
stuff.
about this experience I had.
No, for real. And so for me, what ended up happening was like I had, my couple girlfriends, my sisters, but like I had a couple girlfriends that were really, really like my safe spaces. And I remember
Mm.
there was one friend in particular that we joked like she lived in the same city as I did, and we would go to the same local park. And we met one day at the park, and no lie, within 5 minutes, we were talking, and we both were like, so we're best friends now, right? And we just knew, and we vibed. And so and the beauty for me of having those kind of relationships and and again just a few, it wasn't like I had all the like
Yeah.
just having like 2 or 3 girlfriends who I knew I could just really be really unfiltered and really raw and just say the things that were really hard.
Mhm.
Um, but again, like that, even that's hard. Like some
Yeah.
people, that can be really challenging to like, who is that safe
Yeah.
person?
Well, and I
And then,
felt so
and
lucky
then,
that I had someone like Megan. I like could tell her like this is really hard and then start crying because I don't cry often.
yes.
So to open up and cry to her was like, I'm so glad I have
Well,
you. If you weren't around, I would
And then
I'd keep those tears in, and that would not have helped.
No, totally. And then you became one of those people for me as well. Like at that point, I don't remember how.
I think both of our children were like causing chaos, and we were both like.
But I can't remember like at what point we like, you and I like connected and saw each other, whatever that was. But I remember when that happened, it was that same thing of like you said, like you saw in my, we saw something. I was like,
I feel what you're feeling right now.
I remember just at that, when we were having that time of connection, when the kids were really little, like Iggy was still like, I mean, he was like 6 months old.
Yeah.
And so Axel was like 2.5. And I remember those first 3 years of Iggy's life were just so hard.
Yeah.
Like the 2 under 2 was so hard. And I just felt emotionally raw. And I remember that was something that was also really hard, was just feeling like, of course I loved my kids. It wasn't that I didn't, but just feeling like, I don't even.
I'm running on fumes.
Am I loving you enough? Yeah. Is that good? It's like just doing it, and and it's so weird too now. Like it's so trippy when you look back at photos, and I can look back at photos from when I was a new mom the first time, and then new mom second time, and I know what we were going through in our marriage, in our careers, with the babies, and how hard things really. I remember just some of the darkest times, truly. But then looking at these pictures,
those pictures,
and it's like, oh my gosh, it was like these smiling little babies, and I'm just holding and smiling.
I did a blog post where I put a bunch of pictures of like, things I posted on Instagram. Isn't this beautiful? But I can see right through those pictures, and I know exactly like I have all these pictures of my middle jet, and I look back and I'm like, gosh, he was so cute. Like, how did I not see that? Because for me, all I saw was, this is hard. He's not sleeping. I'm so exhausted. And I look back now and I'm like, I wish I could just smell his head again, because he was so darn cute.
I know.
But I didn't see it. It was just hard.
And thank God for the pictures, because I think it does give context to now. It's like, it is really such a big reminder of like, that is life. When we are going through our hardest moments, when it is dark and it is grim, because that is life. There are times when, you're going to be there. Like the sun will always rise. Yeah. Like, it is hard, but it's not forever.
Yes.
And like, you have way more strength and wherewithal, and you're a good person and a good mom and an amazing woman, I'm grateful for that, because, and I can say that even about like, that whole thing of like looking back at pictures from my 20s, and I'm like, oh my God, all the hangups I had about myself and life and all the dramas. And I look back like, oh my God, she didn't even know. Like, life was so easy. Oh, she had no clue, And so it's like, everything is relative, right? Like when we're in it, just giving ourselves, just being so gracious with ourselves. Right. Because,
And like so many of the listeners right now, you're in it. Like you're in it. And you are going to come up for breath. And it's coming. It's coming.
It is coming. But that was something really healing too, was finding outlets. And again, like I just knew myself enough to know when I have those people, give myself permission to really go there. Don't sugarcoat it for, I don't know. I just can't either. Like, and I think that's
I sugarcoated a lot. Like I was like, everything's great. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
And one day I remember when I was teaching, I broke down in front of my principal, which I would have, and I was just like, this is just really hard. I remember, and I left and I was like, I can't believe I cried in front of my principal, but I never let it out. So then it just came out in front of her.
Well, and that's the thing about life. It's like, if we don't,
I probably should have picked a better person to cry in front of than my principal, but it just,
but those are those life lessons too. It's like, if you bottle stuff up for so long or sweep it under the rug, it's like, something's going to give. It's going to come out in some way. Yeah. And it's probably not going to be the most appropriate. So
but I love that you shared your journey of like how you found your way of like coming to terms and healing with that. Because there's not one size fits all. There's counseling, there's like just talking to a friend. Like that for me was healing, just to be able to share. So, or start a podcast where you talk all about mom stuff to heal from your, but that's why I'm doing it. Because I feel like moms need to hear the truth. I need to speak about that. And
it's interesting because like on that note, before I had Axel, so when I was pregnant with my first, the year before I was pregnant, I had been in these like women's groups for like a while. That was something I was always really excited about, and just participating in like weekly like wisdom circles, wisdom calls. And they were like spiritually minded women. And so that year I deep dived into more like training and stuff. And I was learning about these like the concept of like the red tent, and like gathering with women to have these like sacred ceremonies and experiences where you meet once a month at certain time of the month and pray and set intention, all these things. Right. And I was really excited about that. And the reason, and then I took a training to learn like, how do I become a facilitator to lead these groups myself? Because I had been participating in them, but not leading them. And I knew, something in me knew, like, you're having a baby and
women,
you need this. Like, you're going to need to create like a circle of women, and to create, and there was so many facets of it for me, of like feeling like this deep inner calling of like, I don't know why I'm so jazzed about this, but this has always just been like, work, like connecting with women has always been such a passion. So I'm going to do that. So, okay, I feel called to do that, but also like, this whole being a mom thing is probably going to rock your world. Like, maybe
I'm impressed you had that foresight, because I didn't. I just thought, I've wanted to be a mom all my life. This is going to be wonderful. And then it hits and you're like, oh my God, this is not what I had pictured.
Yeah.
But I love that, because don't you feel like in our society, everyone lives in their little house and we're like so separated from community?
Yes.
I tell my friends all the time, I want to live in a tribe where we all raise our kids together. We're all cooking dinners together. Like, women are all out raising, like doing it together, instead of like, I'm going to go off to my house. You go off to your house. We'll see you when we can. We're all busy with our lives, that we don't come together as moms and women.
I think so many moms, I'm sure so many of your listeners, everyone's had that conversation of like, okay, when are we starting the commune?
Where's my tribe? Where's my tribe?
Like I've had that conversation with my friends too. But I think you're right, because I think that especially in our society, we are like, the whole idea of like the village is not, we don't live in that framework. We don't live in that framework. It's very individualized. It's very like the American, like, we'll just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and everybody be independent and do your thing, which is like, can be lovely in some ways, but it's also not the way we're meant to live.
Like, you have to fight for that village. Like, you have to find it. And like, just like talking to a mom at the park, it's like, oh yeah, honey, I talked to a mom at the park today. But then it's like, how do you start a relationship and form a friendship? Like, that's been a journey. But that's why I'm so grateful your circles, because it's like, that's the first time I've really like joined a group of women that just openly shared about everything, and not even like women that all know each other. Like, a lot of us are strangers when we come together. So like, having that is so special. So
so circling back to that, exactly. Like, so there was something in me that thought, okay, this whole next stage of life, like there were so many things inside me that called me to like create a container of women, supporting women. And so so I've started leading these circles that I've just, they've been very informal for a while. Like, they were just like, okay, it was friends really, and then friends that whoever could come. And now I'm like excited. I'm like, branching out, and it's realizing like, this is what I was born to do. Like, I need to, like, and
this is needed. This is needed, and it's especially needed for moms.
And it's needed also for moms, and like, and just, I was going to say, for women, because I think, again, coming back to this idea of the village, like, we're not meant to just like pick things off of Google and be like, okay, I'll just got my questions answered. Anyway, it's like, it's about the vulnerability. It's about the sharing. It's about like talking enough about difficult things, talking about the hard things to normalize like just humanity, like just being like, oh yeah, we're meant to feel this. Like, and I think too, as a woman, like all the cycles of life, like talking about, going from just like our maidenhood and our, getting your periods into the transition of motherhood, the transition of like, what happens to your body, what happens to your mind, to your relationships. And then
what happens when these kids are a little bit older and growing up and you're like, well, I'm done having the kids. That feels weird. Like, that whole purpose in life of like birthing kids. Now it's like, oh wait, now I'm in a different phase.
Yeah. And then beyond that too, now I'm starting to think like a lot of the women that come to my circles, like some of them are like older. They're like in their, like in their 50s now. Not that that's old, actually. I don't consider 50s old, but most of the women that come in our circles are like 30s and 40s. And so some of the older women, I'm looking at them thinking, wait a minute, like we need to start talking about premenopause and menopause. Like that's where we're headed. Like, again, these ideas that like we don't talk
like the taboo to talk about.
Yes.
Like, ooh, don't go there. We don't age. No one ages.
Right. All these, just all these different cycles and these stages rather of womanhood. Yes. And like supporting each other in them, because there's all these different levels of trauma. Throughout,
Absolutely.
And having like the support to, and just having like a safe landing spot and whatever, again, like what it doesn't, and for me, again, obviously the circle thing is a big deal for me, but like you said, whatever that ends up being for you, whatever, like whatever
feels safe,
find your healing and whatever that, But I think if I were, people always say that whole question of like, what would you tell your younger self kind of a thing. And if I were to tell my my first pregnancy self, like I would just be, don't be afraid to like ask for help and look for the support.
Yes.
Because, or rather not even to ask for it, but just to be open to it. And it's funny actually, because I remember actually thinking back, one of my cousins did say that to me when I was first pregnant. She said, take all the help. She's like, whenever anybody asks you if they can help you, just say yes.
Yes.
Don't poo-poo it. Just, and I was like, okay.
That would have helped me so much
at
the beginning.
And, but I think now
even now, I'll take all the help I can get.
Anybody wants help? Come on in.
I don't have any dinner plans tonight. I'm all
dinner. Because I feel like that's a whole thing that's hard to practice too. It's like, it's one thing, like asking can be hard. Asking can be really hard. Yeah. But equally accepting and receiving the help that's a whole nother because again, there's somehow we are trained that like we're supposed to just do it all or, and that's, it's like unnecessary. Like,
oh my gosh, we could talk about this for days.
We could.
There's so much.
There's so much.
Well, I would love if anyone wants to find you on social media, because I feel like you have so much coming that just
thank
moms need to see. Where can we find you?
They can find me. So my personal Instagram page is VW Soul Sunshine. Okay. And my business page that I'm starting and is Foxy Mary Ritual Collective. And the website I'm in the middle of building. So stay posted for that, or keep posted for that, because that will be foxymary.com.
Okay. And I'll put all of those in the show notes.
Yeah.
You never know who's going to need Vanessa. Who's going to need to talk to her.
Thank you. I'm so excited for this opportunity.
Yeah. And thank you so much for opening up about this, because
of course
this is something that needs to be talked about. And I don't think this should be the end of the conversation.
No, I'm excited. I know. And I'm so excited for your podcast. I'm so overjoyed for you. And I'm hoping this is maybe the first of repeat visits.
Oh, I hope so. I hope to have you on again.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone for listening today. Remember, a new conversation comes out every Friday, so make sure to subscribe. And everyone burns their first pancake, so just keep living. Just keep living.